The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I am Erica Lukes. I was very thrilled to be here spending Friday evening with my friends from all over the world. It does me a lot of good to get into chat and to see Joe, Lib, Mark, Northern UFOs, Tim, Tom, Amy, Doug Down Under, Jeff. Everybody, I really appreciate your love and support and all of your questions. You ask very thoughtful, considerate questions, and that means a lot to me, and it proves that we can move forward with integrity and respect, and that is what we need and what we deserve. As I move into my studies and my research further, it becomes more and more evident to me that there are things I need to know about, and I am not a nuts and bolts believer in the UFO phenomenon. I believe there are many different aspects of this, and I believe there are many different things that are interacting with us. As I've interviewed different researchers, especially Nick Redfern last week, who mentioned his belief and of the occult, of demons, of the power of the unseen to manipulate your life. I look at the work of John Keel, Dr. Jacques Vallée, all of these people who understand that, yes, there is something there. Is it extraterrestrial? We don't know. Like I said, there's so many different layers to this, but it pays to understand that perhaps there could be something demonic that is interacting with us. Skinwalker Ranch is one of those places that is a prime example of what some might call demonic activity. Hardcore researchers that were with Bigelow during the NIDS days that were at Skinwalker Ranch, from what I understand, from what I've heard numerous times, were not willing to go back on the property because of the negativity that was seen not only at the ranch, but negativity that followed them home and affected their families. So what is that? And how do we as researchers or people who have very profound experiences, how do we protect ourselves and gain knowledge so we can understand? An interesting thing happened. I have a client, Cheryl, who I love at the Pilates studio, and she told me about a friend of hers, and she was kind enough to put me in contact with Sister Mary Joan, and I spoke with her, and I fell in love with her immediately. She is so smart, gutsy, kind. She put me in contact with my guest this evening. I spent a couple hours on the phone with Bishop Bryan Ouellette, who is just an accomplished man. I had a great conversation, so I knew it was very important that I get him on the show so you could learn from all of his experience. He is a semi-retired biritual autocephalous Eastern Orthodox Western Catholic bishop, an exorcist for the Old Roman Catholic Sacred Order of St. Michael the Archangel, Order of Exorcists. He offers private consultation or instruction in Jito Zen meditation, mysticism, prayer, and Christian esotericism. And that is such a wordful. Are you kidding me? You might have to help me out with this. He completed his degree in psychology. He worked in a multitude of clinical facilities managing the care of clients suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and traumatic brain injury. This is very important. Before designing a successful compilation of primary prevention methodologies targeting at-risk children and teenagers. During this time, he also completed postgraduate work in education, philosophy, and metaphysical science, through which he received his ministerial doctorate. I knew I was going to mess up, and attained the title of metaphysician. He has been on numerous boards, worked to resolve inner-city adolescent homelessness, and accomplished instrument-rated pilot. He's an accomplished pilot. So he is formed with several other people involved in the Catholic Church. He has formed an order of exorcisms, and he has been on Ghost Adventures with Sister Mary Joan. And this was one of the shows was very relevant to Utah because it took place in Ogden. And I could say so much more because your bio is long and clearly it twists my tongue. So welcome to the show. I am excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Erica. I really appreciate being here. It's quite a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you because you have really delved into a lot of different areas, and this wasn't something that you had a diehard, lifelong, correct me if I'm wrong, belief in. This came to you through practicing and learning about different ideas and theologies. I mean, so tell us how you got involved, what your path was.
Oh my goodness. It really goes back to the very beginning, but it's not something that is obvious except in hindsight, So when you come and you arrive at where I'm at now in my middle-aged years and looking back, I can see that there was a cohesive story to be told. But at the time, I didn't know where this was leading me until quite recently, relatively speaking. I would say not until about 2013 is about when I started to realize that there was some direction to everything that had happened or transpired in my life, going back to even early childhood. So it's a journey, it's a process, it's a vocation. It's not something one chooses to do. I know a lot of people ask me on Twitter when they see me on TV or they see me doing my work, hearing me on podcasts or radio shows. They always want to know, what made you want to be a bishop? What made you want to be an exorcist? And I always have to come back and say, what makes you think I wanted either of those things? You really would have to kind of be out of your mind to want those things. They kind of find you, and then you're compelled to fulfill them. It's truly, genuinely a call from God, and there is no choice but to say yes to it. And that's what I've done. So, I'd have to say it's a lot of discernment. It's a lot of prayer. And then it's a lot of trial and error until you finally realize where it is that God is placing you. And becoming an exorcist and working in this very dark side of the ministerial life. And I call it a dark side because, people don't become ministers or priests for the to be fighting and waging war against unseen spiritual forces that in many cases are much more powerful than you are. You tend to be going into these things because you want to perform charitable works, help the homeless, feed the hungry, that type of thing, or even performing baptisms, bringing babies into the church, marrying people so that they can start families. You don't get into it with the idea that you're going to go and fight the darkness. And I don't think anybody really enters priesthood with that inclination. But it is what it is. And not everyone can do it. There is a certain charism to it. There is a certain quality of the Holy Spirit that comes with it. And because of that, we must respond. And if you have that gift, that grace from God to do this work and to do it well, then you're kind of obligated just out of virtue of being a Christian and having to do what God is asking you to do.
So how did you, and I know what you're saying, this is a calling. I mean, I really believe that, like some of us who feel compelled to research all of the UFO phenomena and paranormal and all of these things. I mean, I feel that in a way it is my duty to do this and to try to get information out to the public. And I enjoy doing that, but there are darker aspects of that. But when you first decided that this was going to be your calling and your path, what was the first real encounter that you had with something evil?
That I would have to say, my goodness, I would say that would take me back to, again, young childhood. I grew up in a area where my grandparents had several acres of land that was mostly undisturbed wilderness, and not really wilderness, but wooded property surrounded by swamps. So there wasn't a lot of development around that area when I was a child. Eventually that changed as I got older and as some of the landowners sold their land and people started putting up, erecting neighborhoods around it. But at the time there was an expanse of emptiness around my grandparents' property. And being, we're talking the 70s here and early 80s, but mostly the late 70s, people had a different mindset back then than they do today. And it was not unusual for me, even being very young, to just go out there in the woods by myself and stay out there all day and not come back until after dark. If my son did that today, I probably would be calling the police and saying, "Where is he?"
Right.
But in those days, it was no big deal. And so I spent all my time out there, even and particularly I liked it after dark because there were experiences to be had. It was the woods were alive, and I was always very much a sensitive, spiritually speaking, even from as early as I can remember. And a lot of the times when I would go out there and interact with things, I did not realize until I got a little bit older that this was not normal, that the types of experiences I was having out there were not the things that my friends were having or that, even my own family would understand. And so I would go out there and talk about these creatures I would meet in the woods. And I think they just thought I was, just very imaginative and not realizing that I was actually being quite serious and literal. My memories are very clear of this time, but most of the experiences I had out there were very positive, but there was a section of the woods that seemed to have a darker energy to it. And when I went and ventured into that or found the courage to go into that section of the woods, I discovered a extremely dark presence that was very, I don't even know how to describe it other than nauseating. It left you with a drained, sick, almost feeling that feeling that you get when you just learn that someone has died that's close to you, that feeling of hopelessness and emptiness and loss. All of this sort of combined, and it was all triggered by a figure that had the appearance of what I guess you could say would be archetypally a demon. And I did not, of course, know what that was at that time. We were not a very religious family. We were, I guess if you had to ask us what we were denominationally, my family would have said Catholic, but we never really went to church except for maybe once or twice a year. And there wasn't a whole lot of religious practice or religious conversation in the house. So, demons were not something that was terribly familiar to me. The idea of there being a dark side to the spiritual nature was not something that was familiar to me. But I met with this thing that left me absolutely drained of all my energy, absolutely fatigued and in despair. I can't say I felt fear. And it's interesting because I don't think I've ever really known fear. Even going back to childhood, I don't think I can really say that I've ever experienced true fear, which is an asset in this work because I've never felt a reason to be afraid of anything that I come across, and it's given me a certain sense of courage that allows me to do the work well, I think. But I would say that would be the first time I encountered. It was almost as if Satan himself, and I'm not saying it was Satan, but it was definitely demonic. But it was almost as if Satan himself was making himself known to me, almost as if to say, I know who you're going to be, and I know the trouble you're going to cause. So why don't you just stop now and remember this, because I'm coming for you later when you come for me. It was almost that type of exchange. And my childhood mind couldn't really wrap itself around that experience, but it did stay with me, and it certainly did make more sense as the vocation to priesthood became more evident in my later years.
And it's really true, and it's interesting to hear you say, as a young child, you were out there and you could see different things, or you had interactions, because I have as well. And I think most people who have had UFO experiences have also had paranormal experiences. And it's not just one experience. It's often when you go back and reflect on your life, it is a whole life of experiences.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. And like I said, when you're going through it, it doesn't seem to have any cohesive pattern. But in hindsight, when you look back, you see that every step of the way it was leading you in a particular direction. And that is the hand of God in the situation. There's no question in my mind about that. I was never really a man of faith. I can't say that I was ever really, this is how I know that faith is a gift. I tell people all the time, atheists give me a horribly hard time on Twitter in particular. And I can understand where they're coming from, because I was there. I was in that position. In fact, Buddhism was extremely attractive to me, because it is sort of a religious pattern or a religious path that doesn't really require any type of theism in order to practice it. And so that became extremely attractive to me as I, developed along my own personal spiritual path. But people ask me about, how do you find faith? There's, you got the atheists who are very self-righteous, and then you've got those that are truly in despair. They want to believe, but they can't find a way to believe. And I always tell them both. It's for regardless of which type of atheist you happen to be, faith is still a gift. If God doesn't choose to give it to you, there's nothing you can do to get it. There's nothing you can go to seek it. There's no minister you can listen to that's going to inspire you to find it. God has to call you to it. And it's not just priesthood. It's not just any of the more conventional, traditional vocations. It's faith itself. And that's how I know, because I was a man completely devoid of faith and didn't have any use for it or any desire for it. And then it was thrown at me. I had no choice. So here I am, this, very atheist person, yet having had all this dramatic spiritual experience in childhood, having come to a point in my teenage years where I rejected it all, and then decided to take on a very atheist persona, because at that point I really didn't have much of any faith in any type of God or deity. And then God himself reveals himself to me. And that changed everything. That changed my entire perspective. I had to rewrite the book of my life at that point, because everything that I thought was true by that point was no longer relevant. It was all a lie I was telling myself. And then at that point, again, that those very deep and profound spiritual experiences I had in childhood started to make sense. And then it started to work together. And then I started to see a journey here, a path. There was some type of direction to follow. And I always had one prayer the whole time. I always said, God, every time it felt like it was too much, I kept saying, God, it's too much, but I want more. It's too much, but I still want more. That was my prayer. And I can say it was always overwhelming. And it was, in many ways, too much. It still is too much. It's too much for one man to handle. I couldn't do this work without that faith. I couldn't do this work without the hand of God truly working with me, because we are powerless against these forces. Most demonic forces, at least in the Judeo-Christian sense, are, the genuine demons are fallen angels. And so we're talking about angelic creatures that are far more powerful than humankind. So without the grace of God, we don't have any power against them. with the grace of God, there's nothing that they can do to us. Not really.
And it's interesting because when you hear about people who have had very frightening abduction experiences, and I've heard this over and over again, as has my colleague and friend Ryan Burns here in Utah, you hear about stories where people, invoke the name of Christ, and whatever this is gone.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it happens. I a lot of the cases we get about, I'd say, Erica, we get about, these days we're getting about 8 cases a week. It used to be, close to 8 cases a month, but because of my appearances on Ghost Adventures and Travel Channel and having more of a presence, people are finding me more, and so the cases are increasing. And a lot of them are, when you read them, they are classic alien abduction scenarios. We're talking creatures that look like the Greys. We're talking medical type procedures. We're talking abduction, not being able to move, even in some cases being elevated to spacecraft or what looks like some type of operating room. All of the classic features that you would see in a alien abduction context, or that whole arena of alien abduction phenomena. And yet they come to an exorcist. And the reason for that is a lot of them have found that deploying traditional Christian techniques against demonic forces seems to have some type of successful effect against what these things that we would more closely relate to aliens, it has an effect against them in the same way. And I find that interesting. And I'm not saying, I know a lot of the evangelical groups, a lot of more of the non-denominational Christians are teaching, some pastors are out there teaching that the whole alien thing is a demonic deception, that there really aren't any aliens, that there really aren't any spacecraft coming to this planet from other worlds, that this is all just a demonic deception. I do not subscribe to that particular model. I do firmly believe in life beyond this planet. I think it is actually quite very egocentric to think that we're the only intelligent life in this universe that is far larger than anything we can possibly imagine. And I do think that what people are reporting as alien abductions are genuine cases, because I've had experiences myself, as we've talked about privately. I've had my own spiritual experiences quite recently where they would be more classifiable as a alien abduction rather than some.
And that's interesting, and I've got to cut you off right there because I want to talk more about this. I am here. This is Erica Lukes. You are listening to UFO Classified. Get into chat. You can call in, ask questions. The number is 702-425-9230. We will catch you on the other side of the break with Bishop Bryan Ouellette.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Paranormal radio never sounded so good. Join the hosts of the American Ghost Hunter Show each week as they shoot from the hip without holding back.
They're kind of unpredictable, not like the rest of us.
Live every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come hear some of the hottest authors, investigators, as well as TV and radio personalities from around the world on the American Ghost Hunter Show.
Our survival depends upon it.
Hauntings, UFOs, cryptos. If it's branded paranormal, we'll be talking about it. The American Ghost Hunter Show. Live Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The only question you have to ask yourself, Are you ready for it?
Yeah! All right!
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Make a note of it. It's great.
The Fenton Files, where it's all connected.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Come explore a universe full of possibilities. Every Monday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. The Fenton Files. Go where no other show has gone before.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there.
Whether it be UFOs, aliens, conspiracies, or even consciousness, your host, Lorian Fenton, has a file for that. The Fenton File. Your journey to the truth is but a file away. Live, Monday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The Fenton Files.
Incredibly intense.
Where truth is just waiting to be discovered.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good, as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington, every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, and thank you so much to all of you for tuning in, all of the people that send me messages. Every day I am reaching out to new people from all over the world, and it's really touching to me to see people opening up and sharing very personal and profound experiences. Thank you very much. And if I can't get back to all of you, please know that I'm reading your messages and I really genuinely care. I'm thrilled to be here on KCOR. I just have to throw this out. I want to thank my producer, Tina Marie, who is the best producer, and I love her dearly. She is a good human being. On that note, I want to thank my friend and right-hand man, Northern UFOs, who has done a relentless job of getting my radio series out to YouTube. So you can find that on YouTube, and make sure you post comments, get the information out there. I am here doing this for you. I want to give you good content. And my guest this evening is someone that I was drawn to through different synchronicities and with my own personal pursuit, and knowing that I am putting not only myself but my family into situations, and I need to be smart. I need to understand, or at least have a good idea of how to protect myself and those I love. There are many different layers to this, and as I mentioned in my opening monologue, people that have researched this and people that I respect and trust who've been doing this for decades, they understand that there is something very, very malevolent involved, as well as things that are neutral or benevolent. So you need to be prepared. My guest is Bishop Bryan Ouellette. Did I pronounce that right? Ouellette?
You did. That sounds beautiful.
Oh, it's a miracle. Well, I'm so glad. But, you're so amazing. And when I read your bio, you have a very important background in psychology, a multitude of clinical facilities managing the care of clients who suffer from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, brain injury, all of these things. And so that is a very important part to being an exorcist. And in the last segment, you were talking about experiences you had with dark entities as a child, and then finding your way and finding God again. And I just think this whole thing is fascinating. But you mentioned, and this is, I love this, you're talking about UFOs and some of the alien abductions that perhaps could be demonic in nature or not. So let's continue with that.
Yeah, and like I said before the break, I have had personal encounters, and I think that just comes with this work. People don't really realize that the more you get involved in the study of the paranormal, the more the paranormal makes itself known to you. Some of that, there's different theories as to why that happens, but I personally think it's because we become more sensitive to it. We align ourselves more closely to it. Everything in life is vibrational. And I think the reason that the average person has a very narrow field of what they can experience, or a narrow field of awareness, is because they're not attuning or cultivating the expansion of those faculties of awareness. The more that we engage in certain practices like prayer and meditation, the more our faculties of awareness change and expand, and those vibrations widen so that they become more compatible with other states of reality. And so I firmly believe that the more that you do this work, the more sensitive you become, the more those faculties of awareness expand, and then you start to more easily see things that before you couldn't see, or that the average person would not be able to see. Psychic ability, that they would call it, or even being a sensitive or an empath. These are not special gifts. These are things that all of us have the ability to cultivate if we spend some time doing it. And so, in my work, in the work that I do, being engaged as I am in this type of, mystical study, things make themselves known to me. And the alien phenomenon is not exempt, even though that's not the focus. I'm not out there hunting for alien encounters. I'm mostly looking for the existence of genuine demonic cases so I can heal people and heal their lives and get this negativity out of their life. But in some ways, we do end up finding other types of phenomenon, and I am convinced that the alien phenomenon is a separate thing, although there is a relationship between them. And in my own experiences with them, I do feel that there is some type of interdimensional relationship. I do feel that this might be something that we would be more classifiable as an elemental or a primordial. We have 4 different categories of demonic entities that we look for. We use this classification system in my work. It's not really a universal classification system, but in our own research, in our own study, it works well for us, for our model in drafting a treatment plan for healing people, because that's what we do. We're not paranormal investigators to go out there and prove that the paranormal exists.
Right.
We're not out there to satisfy our own curiosities. We're just out there because people are having spiritual crises. They don't know who to turn to because most people don't know how to fix it, and we do. And so that's what we're out there. But there's the first category of demon, which is a fallen angel. That's the typical Judeo-Christian concept of Satan, the idea that he was once an angel and he fell from grace by rejecting God. And there were other angels that aligned themselves to that purpose, and they became demons along with Lucifer. And so you get that theological story. that isn't really a literal story. It's more of a metaphor for an ineffable spiritual reality that is beyond human comprehension. So we have a story that kind of gives us an idea of a way of looking at it, because the nature of the angelic realm is so far beyond us, we wouldn't understand it any other way. So that's the first category, and that's the classic one. And that's typically, where we would pull in the big guns of major exorcisms, or the solemn rite of exorcism. That's what you saw, what you see in the movies, what you see on television, that type of thing. But there's three other categories, and those are far more common. And one of those is elementals, or what we call also primordials. They're the same category. And these are creatures that are basically non-corporeal. They don't have any physical characteristics like human beings are. Human beings are both corporeal and non-corporeal. We're corporeal in the sense that we have a physical body, and we have 5 senses that arise out of that physical body. And then we have a brain that is quite physical, made up of physical matter, neurons and cells, which can be physically measured in a scientific way. But then there's also the mind, which has a relationship to the physical brain, but it does seem to have properties that the physical brain does not have, because we can create thoughts, and we can create imagination and have feelings, and these are things that it cannot be tangibly measured in any scientific way, at least not in a sense that you could ever pin down how the mind actually works.
Right.
You might be able to figure out the brain, but all you're going to see is basically electrical activity. You're not going to understand how that cohesive energy becomes a thought or a personality or an individual. That's a completely different thing, and that's completely non-corporeal. So, there are beings in this universe that don't have any physical substance. They are purely non-corporeal. They are of the substance of what our mind is. And so this is where you get into these creatures who are creatures. They are part of creation. So we can accurately call them creatures, but they don't operate at the rules that we do, because we're operating at physical laws, physical rules. And so science is always obsessed with measuring physicality, but it doesn't do very well with non-physical things. This is why theoretical physics and quantum physics, things like that, this is where those disciplines come in, and then we have to get more into mathematics and less tangible studies in order to sort of explain things that we ordinarily could not explain through just pure observation with the 5 senses. And these creatures are, when we encounter some of these primordial creatures, they can make us sick, because vibrationally we are not compatible with them. So it's sort of like being in a room with high levels of toxic radiation. The radiation isn't malevolent. The radiation isn't truly demonic. It's not trying to hurt you, but because we are not compatible with nuclear radiation, it makes us sick, and if we get exposed to it for too long, we can die. Same thing goes with being exposed to these types of creatures. They're not aligned to us in any way that is natural, and so when we come in contact with them, they make us sick. That people are going to experience this as a type of spiritual disturbance, and they're going to immediately think it's demonic, because it has nothing but negative consequences.
And I have to just say that's really an important point, because we, right now in the field of ufology, we have, it's a really important time, and information is coming out, and then there are studies that are being presented that say being in contact, in close proximity to the phenomenon, can make you physically ill, can have disturbances with your mental health, all of these different things. And I like the way you are addressing that it's not necessarily that this is a negative thing. It's just that we don't have the ability to process their energy.
Exactly. And I really think most of the alien abduction phenomenon, let's just say alien phenomenon, the abduction thing is its own subset of the phenomenon, and that can be quite negative and traumatic, but we don't exactly know what is truly transpiring here. We don't know if it is a manipulation, if it is a malevolence, if it is, some type of subversive activity. We really don't know. We just know what we can personally experience. And I can tell you, if you were to take an animal like a lab rat, and put a lab rat through all of the horrible tests that lab rats go through, the lab rat's going to look at you as a malevolent thing, because, I mean, if it had the cognitive ability to really rationalize what it's experiencing in an intellectual way, like we can, they will not be able to truly understand the nature of the scientific research that they are contributing to for the greater good of mankind. Whether or not you're for animal testing or not is irrelevant. What is relevant, though, is that laboratories that do use animals are not doing this because they like being cruel to animals. They're doing it because they see that it's a greater good for humanity. And so we don't know if that's something that might be going on with these other creatures. But I do find that in my study and my research, there is some type of interdimensional relationship, which is very, very similar to the characteristics that these elemental entities that have demonic characteristics operate from. And, as far as like UFOs and some of the technological types of reports that we get, well, why wouldn't another species that might be much more advanced than we are, why wouldn't they have their own technology like we do? So it seems rational to me. It seems that it would make sense. What I'm trying to put it together is how do they relate to the things that we experience that are purely spiritual, like demons and like what we would see in performing an exorcism. And furthermore, why is it that when some people that are suffering from an alien abduction trauma, why is it that the name of Christ is reported to work against these creatures? And that's what leads to some of these pastors reporting that the alien is a demonic deception because, they seem to be subversive. They seem to be subjected to the name of Christ like a fallen angel would, which is very interesting.
I mean, all of this is interesting. And to be honest, you are a breath of fresh air.
Oh, thank you.
I have to say that because it's there's so many gray areas, and you really have studied so much, and you have so many relevant things to say. And I think it's important that people, again, get over their own belief systems, that we need to put things in tidy little boxes because that's not the way this rolls. And it's important to listen to and value people like you who have so much experience and who have really looked at all of this right in the eye.
Well, it's true what you say, Erica. I mean, you have to be outside the box. You can't be locked into any particular belief system or paradigm if you're truly interested in objective observation. And I think, it's okay to have a worldview, and I think we need to have a worldview. I think religion is extremely important. If I didn't, there would be no reason that I should be a bishop. And yet that's a very sacred role for me. It's a very stressful role. I won't argue. I won't say that it's not. It causes me a great deal of stress because there's a lot of stress associated with the role of being a bishop and having to, particularly in the capacity that I am. I'm not just a bishop, but I'm also an exorcist, and that has its own dynamic involved, because we have to be warriors, or we're always fighting. We're always targets for the darkness, and they're always wreaking havoc on our lives. That's par for the course. It comes with the territory, and you just learn to live with it. And it never gets comfortable. You never really like it. You just know that that's the way it goes. But as far as trying to understand it, I don't think a lot of exorcists out there are trying to understand it, particularly in the Roman Catholic Church. They're being trained by the Vatican to fight the devil within the framework of the Catholic paradigm. And that's fine if all you're interested in doing is fighting these things. But I'm not just satisfied with fighting these things. I want to understand these things. I want to know their origins, and I want to know all of the multifaceted aspects to it, because it isn't just one thing, and it's very rarely a fallen angel. We have almost never encountered a fallen angel in this work. It is almost always one of the other three characteristics of the four that are not, in any Judeo-Christian sense, a genuine demon. It's going to be either an elemental, it's going to be what we would call a created, or a wrathful spirit, which is essentially a human being that died in a traumatic way, and so now they sort of take on the personality of that trauma. They become that trauma, and then they become very much a demonic presence for the living. But that's what you see most of the time. Very rarely do you ever come across Lucifer and his demons. I mean, that's far more rare. And I think that gives us, the reason we know this and the church at large does not, is because we're stepping outside the paradigm. We're starting to recognize there is more to this than what the church thinks it knows or has taught about it. And there's nothing wrong with continuing to enlighten ourselves, because if we don't do that, how are we ever going to improve? And how are we ever going to get better at fighting these things so that people can overcome them? I mean, imagine if look at AIDS. AIDS was a huge disease in the 80s. Well, it looked like it was going to be an epidemic of such great proportion that it was going to cut down on the population of the world. I remember it being this thing that almost, we didn't even know at the beginning how anyone caught it. And so it seemed like anybody could get it, and anyone could die. And now it's not a good thing to get, but I mean it's something that we can control because people put research into it. We've learned how to better fight it, and then I would say in another 20, 30, 40 years, HIV might be just completely eradicated. And that's because science is not willing to stay within one paradigm; it moves outside of it. And I think as religious leaders, we are obligated to operate in very much the same way. And that's what I try to do.
And that's important. And I think that, the Catholic Church, has definitely moved away from really dealing with this. And now that we have all of these, we've got science and we have mental illness, and it's so easy to put things in box A, B, C, and D. I really believe that we're missing out on different things. And I think that's critical, and we have to get a handle on the fact that there are all of these different elements. And sometimes, a majority of the time, yes, mental illness can be diagnosed, but there are those rare occasions when there is something greater and more malevolent at work.
Well, they're never going to exist in isolation. The problem is that the mentally ill make a great victim. It's a wonderful alibi for the darkness, because what better would there be than to hide under the appearance of a person who is so mentally ill or psychotic or something of that nature that they would never suspect that there's anything more going on than just the person having a sick mind. So they're wonderful targets because they're usually people that are very mentally ill. Particularly the more extreme of the condition, the easier it is for them to be manipulated by these spiritual forces. And so they are frequently targets. And that's what we end up seeing a lot in many cases, is a person has sort of a comorbidity. You might say we would call it almost a dual diagnosis. In psychology, if a person has a mental illness and then a substance abuse problem, we would say it's a dual diagnosis because they got two factors working against them. And the same thing goes for demonic possession, because if you are demonically possessed or demonically afflicted in some way, that would be classifiable as an oppression or an obsession. There's going to be psychological and emotional consequences to that. You don't just get attacked in that way and there's no damage done. You're going to experience it, and it's going to come out at the non-corporeal level, which is your mind. That's the only connection you have to the non-corporeal aspects of the universe. And so your mind's going to look sick because you are being made sick. But likewise, there are normal physiological situations that can cause mental illness. And there are life traumas and experiences that we have, like a long history of abuse and other post-traumatic stress disorder, things that happen in the physical world that affect our minds adversely and develop a mental illness from that. But that makes us weak and vulnerable to demonic forces to come and step in there. So, you're never going to have one without the other. And that's what makes it so hard, because the goal is not to determine whether or not the person's mentally ill or whether the person's demonically afflicted. The goal is to figure out which was the chicken or the egg. We need to know the causation, because the cure is in the causation. If a person is demonically afflicted and then they get mentally ill because of it, then exorcism is going to be a better solution for them. But if a person is mentally ill and then they have a demonic affliction because of it, then traditional conventional psychotherapy is going to be more efficacious for that person.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I have to just say, we're getting ready to go to break, and the chat room is absolutely on fire with questions. And I want to make sure that I get them to you. And I want to tell my listeners that I am taking your questions and I'm going to give them to the bishop after, so perhaps he can have a dialogue with us on the UFO Classified web page, the Facebook page, because these are great questions and they're really important. And I know tonight's interview, we've got so many things to cover, so just don't give up on me, all of you. And I want to just say, so where Bishop, where can people find out more about you? Is there a place they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. We have so many ways to do that. They can go to our website, which might be the best place to start, which is esotericcatholic.org. That's esotericcatholic.org, or you can go to Nicolaean.org. That's the name of the church. NICHOLEAN.org. Either one will get you to our website. And if you click on the Contact Us tab, it shows, the address to the church. It has 3 phone numbers that you can call, particularly the Spiritual Crisis Office if you're finding yourself in need of assistance. The hours are posted there as well. You can even email the church there. And I'm the most active on Twitter, so if you find me on Twitter, I am at Exorcist Bishop. So just find me on Twitter at Exorcist Bishop and ask me questions there. Most of my Twitter followers will tell you I'm pretty good at getting back to their questions on Twitter. I tend to spend some time there, several times throughout the day and try to answer questions as quickly as I can.
Man, you've got to teach me how to tweet, because I honestly am not, Twitter's not my thing. It's not my bag. What can I say? But we're going to go to break here pretty quick. I want to just say thank you so much to all my new friends from Atlanta for tuning in. That is awesome. And Sister Mary Joan is in the house. That's so cool. Make sure you stick around, because of course the best is yet to come. I am Erica Lukes, and we will be back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I'm Erica Lukes, always happy to be here. You can find me at ufoclassified.com or on Facebook at UFO Classified. Send me messages. I will try my best to get back to you. I appreciate all of you getting the word out about the show. I do this and pay for this every week so I can get you information. I believe so strongly in what I'm doing. And I also feel that right now we are truly living in a time where things are quickening, so to speak. So we're seeing more and more pushed out. We're also seeing, as we know, Tom DeLonge to the stars, all of these important revelations that are coming from the United States government or former officials, from different people all over the world. There's something that is taking place. We need to stand up, take note, and make sure we get good information and move proficiently and with a lot of knowledge and to cohesively. This is going to be important. My path through my different research projects, specifically field research projects around Skinwalker Ranch and in different sacred sites and Heshdal in Norway, have led me to the deep understanding that there are many, many things we're dealing with, and it is imperative for me as a researcher to have respect for all of these different things and to protect myself and my family and loved ones from things. And that led me to Sister Mary Joan, thanks to my friend and client Cheryl, and then to my guest this evening, who I'm really, really grateful that I found him. Bishop Bryan Ouellette is a modern revolutionary Catholic bishop, and he has an unyielding respect for ancient tradition. He understands that there are multiple layers to this and is up for a revolution that empowers us and gives us the ability to move forward with the power and the knowledge that we need. I think this is great. So welcome back. When we were talking last, we talked about so many different things. We were talking about the 4 different classifications of entities or beings that deal with us. And then on break, we were mentioning my favorite place to study, Skinwalker Ranch and other portal areas. And to me, this is important because there are many, many areas like Skinwalker Ranch all over the world. So let's go right there. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a very interesting area of this type of paranormal research. But the one thing that I can say with some confidence about it is that, paranormal activity is not something that is unique to any particular location. What is unique is the particular vibrational resonance of that spot, which there's various reasons for why that is. Usually it's a concentration of different levels of the spectrum of vibration that makes up the quality of creation. Now, that can get very technical, probably beyond the focus of the show. But suffice it to say for now that, there's a spectrum of vibration, just like there is for the visual spectrum, how you have the colors that we can see all the way into, ultraviolet on one end with infrared on the other, and then all the aspects beyond it that are completely invisible unless you have the right equipment. And sound too. There's a range of sound that our ears can hear. Some animals can hear more of that range, but for the most part, there is a range of sound vibration that is there that we just cannot detect. And the same is true for what makes up largely the non-corporeal side of the cosmos. And so when there is a high concentration of those non-corporeal vibrations, then that particular location will appear, from our vantage point, to be active or paranormally active. And so for places like, a Sedona or Skinwalker Ranch, where there are reports of a vortex or any type of portal that might be bleeding into our world, these are just they're basically just metaphors for explaining this type of vibrational resonance that I've been talking about. And so, the kind of activity that you're seeing at these locations, the reason why it seems so unique is because those locations are so vibrationally attuned to the types of creatures that we would classify in that second category of demons, we would classify as primordial or elementals. But I want to warn you, we call them demons just because being in proximity, the average person is going to feel sick. That does not mean that they are under a malevolent attack. So remember, the ancient word for demon did not mean a fallen angel. It was really a type of spirit. And that's really all they are. They're just a type of spirit, for lack of a better way of putting it, but they are part of creation, and they just don't have physical bodies, or they don't resonate at a frequency that is within the spectrum of physicality, to put it another way. And that might actually be a more accurate way to put it. So if you have a large concentration of that non-corporeal energy, then that location is going to be very active. So in reality, all places have these creatures, but there are certain aspects of the world where they gravitate because the energy is more compatible with them. And so Sedona is one such place, although it doesn't have as much of a darkness to it as Skinwalker Ranch. And again, I don't say darkness in the sense that it's evil. I say darkness in the sense that it is very different than the type of vibrational resonance that a human being would be comfortable with.
Interesting. And so, I mean, it's always curious to me. I mean, and I mentioned this before, when Bigelow and his team went there, I mean, they had really, from what I understand, negative experiences there. And a lot of people who have visited the ranch or live in the surrounding areas and who've had some of these experiences have been very significantly affected physically and mentally. And so to hear you talk about that and put that in a different perspective other than the demonic or evil and negative, that really is, to me, that gives me a little bit of relief. So thank you. Yeah. And I have to ask you about, skinwalker shapeshifters, because this is, again, not just in this specific area.
Yeah, it is not. It is not. And if you go through Native American lore, you'll find that all throughout the United States in particular, there are locations that were to be respected and not to be trampled upon, not to be desecrated. They were just naturally sacred places, and sacred not necessarily because they were not necessarily positive energy. Sometimes what we would experience is very negative energy. And they needed to be respected for those purposes. And one of the things that, you see all throughout various cultures is the idea that caves are entrances to the underworld, and that they became associated with entrances to hell. And the reason for that is that these are places where very strong elemental creatures reside. And unless one knows how to make contact with these creatures and ask permission to enter into their realm, one will not be able to do so safely. And so Skinwalker Ranch is just an example of this. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that the ancient shamans knew how to interact with these spirits, would have a relationship with these spirits, and could, some of them most likely were able to communicate with them in a way that they could come out unharmed. But, there are some creatures out there that are just extremely powerful, and we are just not vibrationally compatible. And so it is just best for us to not interact with them at all. Not that they want to be harmful. They don't. But it's kind of like, to give an example, it's not unlike, a human being running around and playing football in their backyard. How many ants and spiders and little insects are being trampled in that process? A person's backyard, that has children or a lot of activity, is a very dangerous place to be an ant. So it would be best for ants not to go there. And it's kind of the same thing for us. There's activity that's happening with that particular level of reality that is so incompatible with what we're doing, which is just basically trampling through like an ant, not knowing where we're going, pretty much going through blind. And we could come out getting hit. Some people might be able to go through and not have much of an experience. Some people might go through and be terrified out of their life. Some people might go through and leave extremely sick or even spiritually injured. And that's just because, they came in contact with something that just happened to be passing through. but it's not malevolent in a satanic sense. That first category of demons that we talked about, fallen angels, this is true malevolence. These are creatures that are here to destroy humanity. The other four categories of demon, that is not necessarily true.
Oh, that's good, and I'm really happy because I know Ryan and both Ryans, Skinner and Burns, are listening to that. We spend time up there, and we want to make sure that we have a good handle on things. So thank you very, very much. But let's talk a little bit about the demonic and how to identify, how to really separate this, and to know if perhaps you are truly dealing with something demonic. What are the signs, the symptoms?
Well, if you're talking about true demons, then we're not talking about the other three categories. We're talking specifically about fallen angels, the satanic category, everything that you would classify as a demon in the Judeo-Christian theological tradition. And so those are things that, if we're looking at possession, which will be the most overt and obvious sign of a demonic attack, which would be the strongest and certainly the last stage of a demonic attack. What we're looking for is the ability to speak in unknown languages that they have not learned, languages that we can confirm they have never studied, and yet they can speak fluently in these particular languages. That's one of the more dramatic signs, and it is in some ways one of the more typical signs. They will almost always, at certain points in their affliction, possess superhuman strength. They will. I've seen where a young girl, teenage girls, like 12 or 13-year-old girls, can actually flail their arms and knock 4 230-pound guys off of her. It's dramatic displays of strength. That would not be expected for somebody of that size. They also will exhibit clairvoyant and clairaudient ability, the ability to know things that are happening in other places, to be able to hear conversations that are taking place outside of the range of that person's normal hearing, sometimes even across the city. They will know a conversation that took place that they were not privy to. And that's because demons are able to travel much faster than we are and they're able to be able to step outside, follow other people, gather information, come back, that type of thing. There will be, in some cases, a darkness in that person's eyes. Now, it's not going to be a complete blackout like you would see on some television shows, but you will definitely see an enlarged pupil to the point that it almost appears in certain light that the whites of the eyes are gone. That is something that we have seen in the higher points of a demonic possession. They will almost always have a disdain for religious objects that have been blessed. They can't touch them. They don't want to be near them. It will agitate them even looking at them. Of course, like we talked about, there will be a progressive physical and mental illness, that medical treatments that are typical for the types of symptoms that they're exhibiting do not work, but prayer does. And so that's one of the things that we do look for. Is prayer helping, but the conventional methods of medicine are not? That's usually a sign that, we're looking at something that might be more demonic in nature and less mental. They will also have various types of odd or inappropriate behavior. Typically, you will see, mostly in possessed children, a lot of sexualization. And they will even make very overt sexual comments at the priest when he comes in the door. Things that, and the child will not have any history of sexual abuse or anything, but yet they will act inappropriately towards the exorcist. That's very common. In the more rare sense, these things that do happen but don't happen very often, and it's not something that you would expect to see even in the strongest of possessions, would be levitation, the ability to literally rise off the bed. That can happen. It just doesn't happen very often. Objects in the room moving on their own. Environmental disturbances like windows breaking, light bulbs bursting, that type of thing can happen. And then bilocation and doppelgangers is also something that we sometimes see. We've only encountered that actually once, and it wasn't actually during a demonic event, surprisingly, but we have seen a doppelganger of myself. We were in a client's home that had a room of mirrors that was actually used by the original owner of the house as a exercise room or exercise chamber, and they had mirrors everywhere, so I guess they could watch themselves exercise or whatever. And the mirrors were left up, but the exercise equipment was moved out. And the client is now using the room as a meditation chamber. And for those of you who may not know, mirrors amplify spiritual activity. So if you are using a particular room for meditation, if the walls are lined in mirrors, you're going to actually amplify that, and it can actually open up doorways by changing the vibration in that room and then letting things through. And this is more or less what was happening down there. And so we went in there because it was one of the more active rooms in the house. And I was standing in front of one of the mirrors, and one of my team members was facing me and looking at me. And while we were doing an EVP session in there, trying to see if we could make contact with anything, find out if anything could give its name to us, the two of the members of my team who were looking at me saw my reflection turn around and look at me, and it scared the hell out of them, and they ran out, and they needed to take a break for about 15-20 minutes.
I would probably guess so.
But that would be sort of a classic doppelganger type of event. Sometimes you'll even hear where the exorcist will be in the room performing the exorcism, and then the people in the house will report that the exorcist is down there praying with them when the exorcist never left the room.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are some of the characteristics, some of the more dramatic examples that I can give you.
And that is, I mean, that's fascinating. When you and Sister Mary Joan came to Salt Lake to perform an exorcism on a man in Ogden, it was interesting because that's a great episode of Ghost Adventures, I have to say. The second both of you landed in Salt Lake, you said that Salt Lake had a very interesting vibe. Can you tell us about that?
I mean, not to say any, because I actually love Salt Lake. I really do. But not to say anything bad about it. But I would actually argue that Salt Lake is a city that should have never happened, because that whole area is so spiritually charged that it really should not have a city standing on it. It really shouldn't. And it does agitate the spiritual energy or balance in that part of the world. And and that will actually create certain spiritual agitations that can mimic demonic events, and so or it can even trigger a genuine demonic event, because energies. One of the primary occult laws is like attracts like, and so if there is an agitation in a particular location, then things that are vibrationally attuned to that negativity will find it, almost like a moth going towards a light, and it increases, and so the negativity increases over time, and so it has no question in my mind. It's not surprising to me that Salt Lake City has a strong, somewhat covert satanic presence. There is some Satanism, very strong Satanism that goes on in that region. And I think it's because it's a great place to make contact with dark forces, just because of how it's vibrationally aligned, and that the city itself is causing an agitation in that region.
And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that when we get back from break, because there is, in ufology, there is a common theme as of late, which is Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, the occult, satanic practices. And I think that it's fascinating to me to see how all of these intersect. And especially since I live here in Salt Lake City, I'm going to be selfish because there is that aspect going on, I'm sure not only here, but all over the world. And it's just something to be aware of. And you will give us more information about that when we get back. But again, let's just tell everybody how we can find you. Plus, I want to tell you guys, go to YouTube, look at Ghost Adventures, or you can find it on Netflix, and make sure you find the Ogden City episode, because this is the episode 1 of 2, which is the other one is Sin City. Is that right?
There's 3, actually. There's Ogden Possession, which was the second one I was on. Sin City Exorcism was the third and most recent from this past season. And then the first one I was on was Exorcism in Erie, and that took place in Colorado.
Okay, great. And I would definitely recommend everybody watching that. And when you and I we had our phone conversation, you told me that there were many things that went on behind the scenes that they didn't even show. And sometimes we look at Ghost Adventures and think, okay, everything's made up, yada, yada. This is another one of those 4 ratings thing. But when I got off the phone with you, it was really interesting to hear your take on that. And that is absolutely not the case, specifically in these 3 episodes when there was something very real and powerful taking place behind the scenes.
Absolutely, and it is true. It does have, because it's a reality show, and reality shows have a somewhat bad reputation for scripting and exaggerating situations so as to make them more interesting and dramatic. And I can say that I can't speak for every episode of Ghost Adventures. I don't know, but I will tell you this: Aaron, Zach, Billy and Jay are some of the most genuine, greatest guys I know. And Zach is very serious about capturing authenticity. He has never asked me to say anything or do anything a particular way. We come into these cases and they just happen. All right. So what you see there is what you get. The thing that you don't.
It's great to know. And I'm sorry, I've got to cut you off because I can see my producer saying, "Hey, I got 1 minute." So we're gonna just take a little break here. This is our last break. Thanks for being active in chat. I'm Erica Lutz here with Bishop Bryan Ouellette. We will be right back.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of 3 Guys, No Ties.
Hello, love bugs. Will you be my Valentine? Tell me, who in the hell came up with this very expensive day in the lives of humans in love? Would you believe greeting cards? If you're an average Valentine's Day junkie, you'll be amazed at how much you'll spend on this overrated Lover's Day. You'll be spending, between the two of you, a cool $450.
3 Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Hello, KCOR radio listeners. Lori and Fenton here from the Fenton Files. Let me ask you, now that disclosure's happened, what does it mean for ufology? Will it change anything? To get the current disclosure answers and learn of alien encounters, the inside of UFOs, the Anunnaki agenda, California UFO hotspots, and so much more, join me at UFOCon 2018 in South San Francisco, California, March 23rd through 25th. Visit caufocon.com, that's caufocon.com, and prepare for the truth.
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
Thursday nights are about to get weird on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Join hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz as they go exploring the bizarre. Jet across the cosmos with two of the most electrifying paranormal researchers in the known universe. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Exploring the bizarre takes you deep within the world of the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology. It's time to take back the night with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. Exploring the bizarre. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Only on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, for Hyperspace, the one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace, hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Want to take a ride?
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the last segment of UFO Classified. I am always excited to spend my weekend with you. I think that Friday nights are fabulous on KCOR, and I want to say that of the wonderful, talented, incredibly kind Tina Marie is going to be up on restricted airspace, so stick around for her. And then Solaris Blue Raven on hyperspace. It is a powerful night of powerful women on KCOR, so stay in chat, ask questions, and let everybody know about this incredible network. My guest this evening has brought in all of his friends and my new friends from Atlanta. I want to say thank you all for getting in there, posting your comments. It is incredible to see new faces in chat. Bishop Bryan Ouellette is a man who has a lot of knowledge in many, many different things. He has been on Ghost Adventures, been on different shows, and you can find him on YouTube and listen to some of his lectures about exorcisms and all of these important things. And I've been drawn to him, and I believe synchronicity has placed me in his existence. And so I'm very happy about that, along with Mary's Sister Mary Joan. But you talked so much about, we talked about Skinwalker Ranch, about the different signs that you looked for when somebody was really, truly demonically possessed and in need of exorcism. So we have some questions in chat that I want to address here. And some people have a negative view of the Catholic Church, and you hear about the pedophilia and the satanic rituals with connection to the Vatican. So what is your response? Because we hear that about the Mormon Church as well.
Well, okay. The thing is that any organization that gets large enough and powerful enough is going to be infiltrated by evil people. I mean, that's to be expected. If you don't think that can happen, then you're not being realistic, because we live in a world where we are I mean, the world is programmed towards the negative. It is programmed towards people's ego driven desires. And so religion's not going to be exempt from that any more than any other thing is. But see, the thing is that religion's not the problem. The problem is how people use religion. So religion is like a very powerful weapon, okay, or a very powerful tool. It can be used in either context. It's sort of like a hammer, okay? I can take a hammer, and with a skilled carpenter, I could build a house with it, or I could take a hammer and smash your skull in with it. That would be a less skillful use of it, but it's still something that a hammer is able to do. That doesn't make the hammer evil. It makes the person who uses the hammer evil. And so, the church is too big to not be victim to evil. That's just going to happen. So what we have to do is always be mindful of that and fight against it at every opportunity that we can. One of the advantages that I have is that I am not under the authority of the Vatican. The Holy Nicolean Catholic Church is an independent Catholic tradition, fully autocephalous. And we have to be, because of the work that we do, the kind of way that we do it, and the approach that we take towards it is not within Roman Catholic paradigms. They would not be able to accept what we do. They would not be able to accept the research that we conduct. And they would not be able to accept the conclusions we come to. That doesn't mean Catholicism is invalid. It just means that we have to operate a very different way than the conventional system. And I'm grateful for that. So, as far as, the Catholic Church with covering up pedophilia and everything else, this is what evil does. It infiltrates powerful systems that are designed to be systems of change and good, and converts them into instruments for evil. That's just what think of it as a type of possession, and it is. And see, the sad part is that a lot of Catholics think that it can't happen to the church, that the church is somehow immune, because it is, in Roman Catholic theology, it is the church upon which Christ founded his way of approaching God. And while theologically that is true from a Catholic vantage point, it doesn't mean that it's being run by angels and saints. It's not. It's being run by men, and men are fallen, flawed creatures, and they're power hungry creatures. And as long as we are aligned that way, there are going to be people that find their way into these offices for the sake of that power. And they make bad decisions, they make wrong decisions, and that's just the way it is. But, it's not like the Catholic Church is the only organization that has never covered up pedophilia. I mean, pedophilia is a big problem in many other denominations. It's just the media doesn't talk about it. And furthermore, it's a big problem in any career that is centered around children. You see it in daycare centers, you see it in schools. It's just the Catholic Church is the biggest face that the media wants to portray when it happens. And so that gets out there into mass consciousness, and they kind of sweep under the carpet all of the other incidences that happen. Pedophilia is a human problem. It should be dealt with as a human problem. It isn't strictly a Catholic problem. But
you're right. Absolutely, you're right. And I have to say that, I mean, we hear allegations of the same types of things in every predominant religion, and I think that's important to state. I know, as much as I look at things with regard to the predominant religion here, and I want to say that the whole church is flawed or negative or evil. I can't do that, because there are many good human beings that are involved in that. And like you say, it is, at the end of the day, it's being run by people who have flaws. So I don't know. And I think it's like easy to go down these conspiracy theory holes. And I admit, the more I find out, I want to kind of jump down a couple of those, but it's important to look at each individual person and say, this is a good human being, and they're trying to do the work of God, or they're trying to help another human being, and we need to honor and cherish that instead of lumping them into one category, saying that everybody's evil. I think that's kind of a dangerous mindset, personally.
It is. I mean, there are really good Catholics, there are really bad Catholics. There's really good Democrats, there's really bad Democrats. There's really good Republicans, there's really bad Republicans. I mean, any affiliation that you align yourself to, any category that you want to throw yourself or attach to, is going to have its mix of good and bad, wholesome and unwholesome, skillful and unskillful. It's the way it is. That's life. And rather than try to find a scapegoat and say, this organization's all evil, this organization, rather than think like that, it is far more, it is a far more intelligent pursuit, a far more accurate pursuit, as to see the underlying intrinsic function of every single institution that exists and look to see what intrinsic function it serves that is wholesome and focus on that. And I think that's what the Nicolaitan Catholic Church has done. It is basically Roman Catholicism without the politics. It's Roman Catholicism without the red tape. We didn't want it. We didn't want to deal with that. We were being held back from that. I was being held back from that. I started out as a Roman Catholic seminarian. I didn't start out as an independent bishop. I was a Roman Catholic seminarian, accepted into the Diocese of Palm Beach, Florida. Went to St. John Vianney Seminary in Miami, and I found so many corruptions within the church, the very corruptions that some of your listeners are referring to, that rather than throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, Catholicism's evil, I'm going to just leave it. Well, I did. I should say that I did do that at first. That was my knee-jerk reaction. I did leave the church, actually 3 times, but God kept calling me back to it. And I really feel that the reason for that was so he could show me that it wasn't Catholicism that was the problem. It was the corruptions of man within the politics and red tape and all of the other things that I found distasteful. So the Holy Nicolaitan Catholic Church gave us an opportunity to break away from all that, but retain everything that was good. And that's what we've done. Now, if the Holy Nicolaitan Catholic Church is successful and it goes on for another 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 years, then guess what? It's going to become corrupted. It's going to have to be destroyed, and someone else is going to have to revitalize it in a new institution again. That's the way it works. But that's how Jesus works. He didn't throw out the temple. He rebuilt the temple out of his own body. Out of the body of the church. And this is what he teaches us to do. And so, let's look at what the systems contribute to, because, Catholicism, we can look at the pedophilia, we can look at the Vatican and the Vatican Bank and all of these horrible corruptions. But why aren't we talking about the grace of the cross? Why aren't we talking about the Eucharist, the life-saving sacrament of baptism, the healing unction of the sacrament of the sick, the holy union of matrimony? Why aren't we talking about the things that the church has given us, that Catholicism has given us, that builds us up spiritually?
And that's a great point. And I have to be. Well, I hate to say devil's advocate, that just sounds so wrong on the show. But, at the same time, it's like there's so many things coming to light now, and so many concerns that each of us has, about many different things, about pedophilia. There are a lot of things coming to light about women and sexual abuse and things that it's easy to say that we should be focusing on love and light, but as change isn't made unless there is a spotlight that is shown on corruption and greed and evil doings of the people that have held positions of power.
Yeah.
And so, it's like I totally get what you're saying, and I want to go there, but again, it's like we're in a really pivotal time where we have the ability to make significant change, and you're one of those people that is doing that because you're pushing the boundaries, and I applaud you for that. And so how do we really come to terms with all of this and understand that we can make a change. And for me, I just want to say, I talk a lot about the negativity and some of the dysfunction and corruption inside of MUFON, which I think is deeply flawed at multiple levels. You can hear me talk about that on every show. But I also say that there are many incredible human beings that have dedicated their lives to getting information out and making sure that boundaries are pushed, and they've really taken a lot of heat in doing so. And so I don't know, how do you find the balance there, and how do you move forward and make progressive change?
I think, you have to tread on without fear. It's like we were talking about during the break, that your listeners, unfortunately, were not privy to. We had some good conversations during the break. And honestly, it really, it's all about treading on without fear. You have to push into these, you talk about pushing the boundaries, and I'm grateful that you acknowledge and you're able to see that I am a person that does this, because, I really feel that this work, the work of this church, the work of this ministry, has done so much good in the relatively short time, I should say, that it's been operational, that it's proven itself. It's a proven model. I know it. I see it work. It's not a question of whether or not it works. And it's Catholicism that makes it work. It's just not politics that makes it work. And we had to have the courage to break away. We had to have the courage to say that we're not going to be subject to the rules of man. We're not going to throw out the laws of God, but we're going to approach them under our own tradition, under our own faculties, for our good purpose. And so the Nicolaitan Catholic Church, a lot of people think that I founded it. I didn't found it. I mean, I was just the custodian of it. I was asked to give it, to be the one that would oversee, administrate, and give care to it. But it was founded by several Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Independent Catholic, non-denominational, even some non-Christians. It was a group of people that were disillusioned and felt disenfranchised by these conventional systems, and felt that it was time for a better way. They were all courageous in their own way. They all had their own courageous approach towards this, and that's how we approach change. So change is not about throwing things away. Change is not about making a value judgment and saying this is good and this is evil. Change is about looking at the good in every situation and making that good better. And that's how you eliminate the weaknesses. And weakness is one thing. Weakness is fear. If you eliminate fear, you eliminate weakness automatically. It doesn't happen overnight. It's all about cultivation too. So there's more work to be done. But fear is the biggest problem. It is the biggest drawback. It will hold you back from any progress. So, when you look at even social issues, going back to segregation, racism, it's about fear. It's not about being vengeful. It's about fearing what you don't know, fearing what is different from yourself. And that's what continues on the evil. You eliminate the fear, and then you eliminate the problem. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen overnight. And people want magic wands. They want you to be Gandalf the Grey coming in and
they're lazy. I mean, honestly.
Very lazy.
That's why, unfortunately, why the world is where it is, because people want to complain about things and they're not willing to get in and do the hard work. And that's what it takes to be an active member of your community, to make change on that level. You have to get involved, and you have to pay attention, and you have to do your due diligence. And it's the same thing here. And so, but I mean, we're all learning. So we all have different experiences, but I want to just say, because we have people who are having interesting paranormal experiences, some are frightening, some just want to know if we're going to be researching things, how to protect ourselves. So what would you recommend as like the first line spiritual defense?
Well, I know that, you wanted, you found interesting my particular viewpoint on sage, and we wanted to find a way to talk about that. So let's start there, and then we'll work into what actually works. Now, I'm not saying sage does not work, but the problem with sage is that it is a spiritual neutralizer. So a lot of people like to use sage because, it's kind of the new agey thing. So if you're not aligned to any conventional religion, then, sage is being billed by the New Age community as a sort of a type of holy water almost, where it will get rid of negative things. Well, the first thing that it is not good for is getting rid of an existing problem. It's not good for that. Doesn't mean it can't do it. It just means that it's not a very effective way of going about getting rid of an existing problem. What sage does is it will keep a problem from becoming a problem. So if you go into a new house, and assuming the house is clear to begin with, then by using sage on a regular basis, you are keeping that home clear of any foreign spiritual vibrations. The problem, though, is that it also neutralizes positive vibration. So it cleans out both, or I should say it prevents both from taking root. So, if you want a completely neutral home, which might be not a bad thing, actually, then, by all means, assuming there's nothing already existing in your environment, then sage will continue to keep it neutral. But it's not going to increase any positivity any more than it's going to let any negativity take root in that location either. So sage isn't my go-to for protection. It just isn't. It's not strong enough, and it's not. It's too much of a neutralizer. So, of course, I'm going to be biased as a Catholic towards the sacramentals of the church. So this is the stuff that you talked about from the blessing kit that you received for your donation, which I thank you very much for. The donations are what help keep this ministry going. We don't charge anybody for our services. So it's only on the generosity of people like yourself that keep it alive.
Oh, and I was so happy. I was very happy to do that and to get my little box of protection. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And to me, again, like I have said, I feel that when I put myself into situations, I want to have everything around me to protect me. And, you can make fun of that as much as you want, or think that this should strictly be nuts and bolts and yada, yada. But I honestly would tell you, there is not a researcher that I respect that has dealt with this, scientific or not, that does not understand that there is something that you need to respect and that you need to really, truly ground yourself and surround yourself in protection. Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's so true. And so, holy water, blessed oil, exercise, salt, blessed objects like crucifixes and things that, Catholics are typically seen using are wonderful tools for protection. But the person has to be aligned towards them in order for them to work, which typically means that they should be baptized in order to get maximum benefit from those things. Because, again, you're talking about a system of alignment and you're talking about vibrational resonance, because all of it is vibration, all of it. And so, in order to gain the benefits of a particular vibratory rate, you have to do the things that are necessary to align yourself to it. So what I would say fundamentally for any person who's going out there into dangerous situations that are of a paranormal nature, I would say you have to be grounded spiritually in whatever particular tradition that you find yourself. If you are not aligned to a tradition, then you shouldn't do it. Plain and simple. You should just stay in secular life, do your work on Wall Street, work for some bank, do some boring job for a grocery store. don't go and investigate, Skinwalker Ranch. It's not going to be good for you.
Most people should not do that. 99% of the people on the planet should not be doing that.
Exactly. But if you're going to do it, then make sure you have some tradition to follow. It doesn't have to be Catholic, but it should be something that you can fully align yourself to, and it has to be a tradition that has its own protection. So Buddhism's great. Hinduism is great. Certain formulations of shamanism are okay. The problem with shamanism is that it's highly unregulated, and there's a lot of people who study a few books from their New Age bookstore, and then they go and declare themselves a shaman, when in reality the only way to become a shaman is to be fully initiated by an existing shaman who has probably spent most of his life becoming one. Being a shaman isn't something you do overnight with a book. Being a shaman is a way of life that you are more or less born into. You are chosen by the divine to enter into. And so, there are far and few of those between. There's very few people like that around that you can go and access. And so, I hesitate to tell people to go that route just because there are so many, I don't want to call them frauds or charlatans, because they really sincerely do think they are what they claim to be.
Right.
But they're not. They're highly mistaken. They can cause a lot of harm without intending to do harm. So, an existing established tradition is the best route to go. So my top three, obviously Catholicism's at the top of my list because that's the one that I am the most aligned to. But, Buddhism is a very almost tied for first. And Hinduism is a very close, I guess you could say third. And so, that's my choices.
Well, and I think too, being grounded, just having, whether it is an organized religion, having a spiritual practice, I think all of these things are important. And we didn't even talk about Aleister Crowley because this is important. And, there is some of that come into play. I want to thank you so much, Bishop Bryan Ouellette. You rock. I knew you would. I'm going to have you back as soon as possible. I love all of you guys. Thank you. I'm going to post links, questions, all of these things to the bishop, and we will get him to answer these. Stick around for Tina Marie. Have a great night. Be safe, and I will catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network.